Welcome to Resiliency Redefined. I'm your host, Robyne, and I am thrilled to share with you information about resiliency, well-being, performance, education, business, parenting, and everything in between. I'm committed to joining you each week to talk about these big ideas and bring them into action, habits, tools, strategies, tactics that allow us to finally uncover what it takes to truly be well. And I'm just so excited that you're here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Resiliency Redefined. I'm your host, Robyne, and I'm excited to continue answering some of the questions that folks have been sharing with me. And please know you are so welcome to reach out, whatever mode works best for you. If it's social media, if it's email, LinkedIn, Instagram, doesn't matter. Whatever serves you best to be able to get in touch to ask your question, please feel free to do so. As I've shared before, I love to be useful. So anytime I can help tackle a big idea, it just absolutely makes my heart smile. So the question we're going to dive in today is, I absolutely love this. The person asks, how do I know if I'm like avoiding or like I'm procrastinating doing something that's really important that would be beneficial to me, but like I keep putting it off, but is it a go-to excuse or what's happening here? How do I know if I'm putting it off for the right reasons? Oh my goodness, this question resonated with me on so many levels because I get to work with folks, again, all around the world. And this is an area that we spend a lot of time thinking about our habits, our routines, our rituals, kind of like our go-to playbooks when it comes to how we navigate stress and our well-being. So my friend Lucy, I got you covered today. I will hopefully be able to give you some key insights on how do you know if you're like procrastinating, avoiding, escaping, all the things. We're going to tackle it in today's episode. And I'm just so glad you asked the question. And I'm so glad each and every one of you are here today. So to be able to understand our behavior, we're going to go back to an oldie but a goodie. It's the phenomena that we know to be true, that every single behavior you do serves a purpose. We absolutely engage in behavior for a reason. Now, the reason might not be obvious to us. It might not be even something that we might be conscious about, but the reality is every single behavior that we do ultimately is trying to protect us. It's trying to keep us safe. Remember, our stress system is our first line of defense. Everything that we do, even though it might from the outside looking in look harmful or destructive, and it could very well be harmful and destructive, ultimately it is serving some function. We wouldn't do it if it didn't. All right. So what does this have to do with Lucy's question? Well, to be able to talk about some of those behaviors, what I wanted to do is share with you some of the like common ones that I see. Okay. So when we think about these ideas it's how we handle a stress response. It's how our bodies are trying to process a situation, ultimately again trying to keep us safe. So when we think about these four common practices of coping that may perhaps be putting us farther away from our goals, I hope this will give you some insight. Now, one of the starting places is to first recognize, ultimately, we talked about this in the accountability episode if you're curious to hear more about this topic. But what helps is recognizing that ultimately we want to think of our behavior as essentially like above the line or below the line. Above the line is the behaviors and the habits that are aligned with my values, my beliefs, things that I want to be known for, things that matter to me. It's like when we're showing up aligned in our integrity, those are the habits that are above the line. Below the line might be habits that are serving a purpose, but they might be moving us farther away from our goals or perhaps even off track or out of alignment, which creates that dissonance, that discomfort. We don't like to engage in behaviors that might, for example, give us some instant relief or quick relief, but ultimately are farther away or getting us farther away of our true self, our true well-being. So what are some of those common behaviors that we see that tend to push people below the line which hopefully might give you some insight, Lucy, as to whether or not this is procrastinating or avoiding, and of course, avoiding being one of them. Okay, so the first one I want to bring to our attention is escaping. So this is when we actively remove ourselves from a stressor, and it could be take the form, for example, of numbing behavior. It could take the example of, again, a wee bit of protest behavior. We're like, I'm not even going there, right? You literally throw up those boundaries, you throw up shield wall, whatever it might be, that you literally actively remove yourself from the stressor. So let's say, for example, you're dealing with a stressor at work. Escaping might be that you literally go for a walk on your lunch hour and actually don't go back. That would be the most obvious example of literally escaping, is that we leave a situation. So we are actively removing ourselves. Now, what that could also look like for escaping, for some of us, it might look like picking up some good fiction and say, peace out. 4 hours later, we avoid all responsibilities. We also avoid all stressors, and we lose ourselves, and it gives us a wee bit of a break. So there's no judgment in any of these coping strategies. What I hope to bring to your attention, again, there are just some that are going to help us stay closer to our goals, get us in alignment with what we want to be doing. And some of them very much could be getting us away from our goals. So let's take that example back up about stressors at work. So escaping would just be I'm out, right? So it's not necessarily avoiding, it's literally actively removing yourself. Okay. Now, if we look at the next piece, it might be ignoring. That's another coping strategy. Maybe your nervous system knows full well that the work situation right now is toxic or difficult, or maybe not even reasonable. Maybe you're being asked to work beyond what's reasonable for a human. Your body knows it, but you're scared to say no because you don't want to lose your job. You don't want to look like you're not competent. Yet we'll say no to rest. We'll say no to certain things, but we keep showing up and we're ignoring all of the signs that this isn't okay. Now, the classic example of ignoring, but our body knows it anyway, are the Sunday scaries, right? Everything's going well. You're pretty good on the weekend. You're feeling pretty positive. Things are lovely. And then Sunday afternoon, that little bit of anxiety starts to creep in, that little bit of restlessness, maybe that fear, whatever that might be, because you're anticipating the stressors that are going to be waiting for you when you log on to work or physically show back up to work if you're heading back in on Monday. Now, the Sunday scaries aren't reserved just for Sundays. They happen anytime when we are really feeling nervous or a wee bit wobbly about something that's going on. So often what happens though is we might be ignoring the impact or the cost of staying in those situations. So what that means is our body sending us all the cues that we are not okay and this is not good, but we stay in it, and we're ignoring some of the pieces of the perhaps the physical symptoms. Another example of ignoring would be, let's say it's time to go for a checkup, right? And you just avoid going to see the doctor because you hold the belief that no news is good news and I'm fine. Why would I rock the boat? I don't need to do any of that preventative stuff. And you just don't even want to go there. You're ignoring the research that says, gosh, early detection is our number one strategy to be able to live really well and long with a high quality of life. Prevention and early intervention are our best strategies. So ignoring, again, it might feel better in the short term, but ultimately in the long term, we're not setting ourselves up for success. Now, the other that we talk about, so we've already talked about escaping, where we physically actually remove ourselves from a situation. And ignoring is when, even though all this stuff is kind of sending us the cues, we don't pay it any mind. We don't give it our attention. The other of there's four in total we'll chat about, but the third one we're going to talk about is that actual avoidance. So this is when we know something and we choose not to face it. Okay, we are choosing not to face it. So let's say you're putting off a difficult conversation, right? Maybe with a loved one, maybe with a colleague, maybe with a friend. And what's happening is you're, instead of like recognizing, oh, this is a difficult conversation, I really need to show up for it, you just notice maybe you start ghosting them. Maybe you start just delaying some of the times that you guys are going to connect. Or maybe you talk about everything else but the thing you should be talking about. Right. And that's one of the gentle tips that I shared with you in the How to Have Difficult Conversation episode earlier. One of the best ways to have a difficult conversation, don't even bother with the small talk, just get right to it. Right. Just don't put yourself in the situation where you might end up like avoiding the thing that you need to be talking about. So let's take an example of you. Let's say maybe you're feeling taken advantage of. Okay, maybe by a friend or a colleague or a teammate, you feel as though they are completely and totally taking advantage of the fact that you are someone who is really flexible or really compassionate or really empathetic. And that person, who very well could be very compassionate, empathetic, and flexible, is starting to notice that, like, whoa, this isn't feeling very good because you're taking basically advantage of my generosity, or you're taking advantage of that compassion, whatever it might be. So you might notice, instead of just saying, hey, we need to talk about this, we might avoid it. We might talk about everything around it except what we need to be talking about. So that's coping strategy. Even though it's not solving the problem, by avoiding it, it's just putting off that discomfort. Even though the bigger discomfort, it's going to become more and more almost dangerous to relationships because we start to build resentment. And we also start to write some pretty interesting narratives to explain the behavior. Okay, so we run the risk of all of a sudden operating sometimes like out of reality versus being able to show up for a difficult conversation. So that is avoiding. Okay. Now, the next coping strategy of the four, and this is the one that I would really encourage you to pay some mind to because it is a coping strategy, but based on comparing it to the other three, I think there's a lot more room to work here that will help us stay above that line, which is delaying. Okay. So this requires a degree of self awareness, our ability to say, like, hey, you know what? I actually have to address it. I am not in the headspace to address it right now. I am not well resourced to address this right now. I am going to address this Monday. And the the challenge, I guess you could say here, is to again be that person who follows through. So if you are delaying as a coping strategy because you're not feeling well resourced, again, no shame, there's no judgment whatsoever, but you do want to be someone who follows through and says what I'm going to do, which means if I delay it, I'm going to make sure there's a deadline to it or something planned. So that way I know I'm not escaping, avoiding, or ignoring. I'm delaying because that makes the most sense. Okay. I hope that is starting to get you thinking a wee bit about some of our go-to coping strategies. Now, let's kind of take a moment just to pause and realize and maybe hold space for recognizing, again, there's no shame or judgment in any of these behaviors. They're all trying to keep us safe. So, for example, maybe the ignoring part, right? You're ignoring that difficult conversation, or you're ignoring the fact that maybe you don't feel like you're being treated very well, or whatever the thing is that you're ignoring. And instead, it's like, okay, I want to do something that's soothing. And maybe the soothing is that we watch way too much television and we become like like we're just consuming content. Or maybe you notice that you maybe lean towards eating sweet things or things that feel like a treat because you're trying to look after that, part of you that, like, hey, life is hard. I want somebody to look after me. I want somebody to take care of me. And sometimes we can do that with food. We can do it with spending. All of those things are attached to the release of dopamine, which allows us to just feel better even for a second. And even just a wee while ago, again, there's no judgment or shame in any of this, because just even a wee while ago, I was in the middle of trying to frame how I was going to deal with this difficult situation at work. And then I paused for a second and was just like, a sales coupon for one of my favorite stores popped into my inbox, and I literally followed the link, right? I like dived into this shopping, and I literally was like, what can I buy in this moment to make me feel better? Like, literally, it wasn't like, what do I need? It was literally like, what can I just click on that is going to give me some relief? Now, thankfully, thankfully, I've learned enough about that behavior for myself that I actually get just a wee bit of relief by exploring, by like seeking out, like going through the website. Like that gives me a wee bit of a sense of like a chase, a little bit of like a hunt. It gives me just that little bit of endorphin starts to go. It feels like kind of exciting. It's novel. And then the act of putting it in my cart, it's going to give me a dopamine hit. And I've learned that I don't actually have to click buy. Yeah, like I actually just the hunt, just the pursuit, the chase, putting it in my cart, that in itself gives me enough of a wee bit of like a little bit of a dopamine hit that I actually don't have to actually hit buy. So, again, why I'm sharing this with you is each and every one of us, we learn different strategies for coping, for navigating stress. Now, that example I gave you, where all of a sudden something popped up in my inbox and I decided to go online shopping, I also could have used that opportunity to push away from my desk, right? Literally the act of like pushing the chair, doing a big sigh breath. I could have gotten up, drank some water, done a few little air squats, rolled my shoulders, maybe even thrown out some laundry. Like I could have gone and got a snack. I could have called a friend. I could have gone and played with puppies. Like there's many opportunities to select a behavior that's going to give you a wee bit of relief, a little bit of ease, a little bit of a distraction, a little bit of a breaking the cycle of stress. We want to be open to learning about ourselves enough, being curious enough about our behavior to recognize when is it time that we play around a website and put things in our carts, and when is it a time that we actually like step away from the stressor, right? So having that awareness about when I'm doing behaviors that again are going to set me up for success or might maybe perhaps maybe derail me a wee bit, you know yourself better than anybody. Okay. You know yourself better than anyone. So trust that building wisdom. You're building knowledge, you're building reps, you're building examples. Now, when I think about these ideas about how we are coping, we again often do this on autopilot if we don't slow down enough to pay attention. We do things on autopilot if we don't slow down enough to truly pay attention. Now, recently somebody asked me on an episode I was interviewed for on a podcast, and they're like, Robyne, if I can only do one thing to increase my resiliency and navigating like stress, if I can just do one thing, what would my one thing be that you would tell me to do? And it was to slow down. When we just take a moment to pause, to give ourselves just a moment to get ourselves out of autopilot and be present, we make such better decisions. We make beautiful decisions when we give ourselves just a wee bit of breathing room. So, again, my invitation just to slow down, especially if you notice that our autopilot behaviors are stuck perhaps on a setting that could be procrastinating or in that way of just like not helping the long game. So a lot of our coping strategies win the short game. They win the moment of us getting a little bit of relief or ease, but they don't necessarily win the big game. They don't kind of carry and extend to where we're actually going to have true relief and rest and healing. So I hope this is useful. Just recognizing that difference between kind of escaping, ignoring, and avoiding, recognizing how delaying sometimes could be pretty useful, but not if we're doing it in excess and not if we're doing it, again, just as a way of procrastinating, using it in a way to make sure that you're ready and you're well resourced to be able to do what you need to be able to do. So ultimately, when we think about the patterns, they have served a purpose and they have served you so well to this point. You wouldn't be where you are right now if you didn't have some coping strategies, the ones that get you closer, the ones that might get you a wee bit off track, but they're keeping you in the race. They're keeping you here. They're keeping you dialed in, locked in. Perhaps, though, there's some of them that we can execute and implement that are going to be a wee bit more restorative, that give our nervous system a chance to just say, I am okay. And remember, okay is enough. And even if you're not okay, getting to the shore is all that matters. Okay. So again, when we are feeling the thick of it, when we are in the midst of these big feelings, these big emotions, these big stressors, whatever it might be, whatever you have to do to get to the shore. Maybe delaying will get you to the shore. Maybe actually ignoring it is going to get you to the shore. It doesn't matter if it's a matter of just being okay, whatever that looks like for you in the moment. So you know what? There is a season and a time to like binge watch your favorite shows, eat all the yummy, delicious things, put off doing things that you know that are going to like elevate you and keep you in that high performance state. There's seasons when we got to take a break, right? I love when I talk to Olympians and they tell me about like, you know what, they work so hard, they dial in, they locked in. And then, you know, every once in a while, they just have this kind of like, and I get nervous when they call it like this guilty pleasure, but they just get like a day off where they are able to just like vegetate. Right. And some people call it like brain rot, which no, all of these are associating these negative labels to rest and recovery. This is not brain rotting. This is not like vegetating to the point where like we're like literally barely functioning. Like, gosh, no, rest. Rest is so important for us to be able to keep showing up with the right perspective of being able to make sure we know what matters most. And then we're able to make what matters most matter most. There is a season and a time for rest. There is a season and a time when we're able to say, you know what, I am not evolved enough right now to handle this. I need to prolong it. I need to delay it. I need to avoid it. I got to just ignore it. My classic example of when I had this beautiful moment of realizing that I'm just not evolved enough as a human, and I've shared this before on the podcast, was when I walked into a high school gymnasium at a Catholic school, mind you. And they were all yelling and they were all chanting. And I was trying to figure out, like, I had no idea what they were saying, right? I had no idea. And it was like, I was just kind of like, whoa, these people are like really kind of upset. And they were chanting and they were screaming. And I remember sitting down and then realizing that they were screaming overrated at my Jackson. Like, this wasn't just the other basketball team and like a little group of their fans. Like, this was a buyout in a high school, which means like every kid in the high school was there and teachers, and they were chanting overrated as soon as Jackson walked into the gym. And I remember like literally being in that moment, being like, I am not evolved enough right now to handle this in any even remotely positive, constructive way. And I remember like picking up my phone and going to like a celebrity like news outlet, whatever. And I remember just like scrolling, like, cause I was just like, I can't even, right? So I like was doom scrolling in that moment, learning all about, gosh, I can't even remember. I think at the time it was all about like Lindsay Lohan having a facelift or something, right? Or a ponytail lift, facelift. Anyway, I went so deep down this rabbit hole of just mindless social media because I just was not involved enough in that moment to be able to process what was happening about what they were saying about my little Jack. I'm like, anyway, nevertheless, I'm sorry I digress, but let me tell you, I still just cannot believe a group of even teachers were screaming this at a kid. Now, to bring that moment full circle, I still remember Hunter's response when I literally texted him at school and I'm like, we need to talk. I like SOS, mom needs some support right now. And Hunter said to me, he's like, Mom, does Jackson know of any of those people? Does he know of any of those students in the stands? And I'm like, I don't know. And he might know a couple of them, but definitely not, he doesn't know all like 1,000 of them. And he said, isn't it wild that they know him? Like, just hold space for that, Mom. Jackson might know a handful of them, but every single person in there knows that Jackson's here to play ball. Right. So, Mom, like, that's pretty cool. Tell Jackson that too. You have no idea who they are, but you know what? They all know who you are and you've earned that reputation. And whether they want to call it overrated, whatever, the reality is, Jackson, you are somebody who's known in the area for your skills, for your talents and your gifts. Again, the the philosophy of Hunter. He's a gift. Okay, my friends, I hope that was useful. Thinking about recognizing all the behavior serves a purpose, recognizing when do we need to delay, when is it that place where maybe we might be ignoring, but our physiology is telling us a different story. when do we escape? When do we avoid? There's no shame in that, because ultimately at the absolute end of the day, your nervous system just wants to make sure you're okay. And it will play dirty. It will. And I'm okay with it, because it is keeping you alive. It is keeping you safe. And when I say it plays dirty, it literally is like, you fall upon that new series where, you watch 8 episodes in a row so you can just forget for like whatever 42 minutes times 8 is what the average show is. You can literally just forget about that jerky situation at work, right? Like, it's just saying, hey, I'm on your side. I might not always choose the best things for you, but your nervous system is the part of you that says, we're going to always make sure that you are okay, because we love you and we want to make sure you're safe and you're good. And again, it's our survival mechanism. And remember, our survival rate right now is 100%. You have survived every hard thing that has ever come your way, every difficult boss, every difficult situation. And there might have been moments where you did not think you were going to make it through, but you are here and you're showing up, and you're obviously listening to stuff around personal development and finding your excellence and your greatness. And for that, I want to say congratulations. You're still in this. Enjoy the rest of your day. I hope that is useful. Keep asking me your questions, and I look forward to connecting with you next time. Take good care. Bye for now. Thank you for spending time with this podcast episode today. I hope you found something helpful in Resiliency Redefined. Please feel free to share it with somebody who you might think could benefit. Maybe there was something useful, something in particular that you think you could pay forward. Also, if you have a moment, please feel free to rate and review this podcast wherever you like to listen to your podcast. It means the world to me. And again, thanks for your time. Thank you for your interest. Take good care, and I'll see you next time.